Hello everyone, and yet another video from us in conjunction with overcoming estrogen dominance. Today the whole day is dedicated towards menopause, hot flashes, okay? And it's kind of counterintuitive, right? To think about, why are we talking about estrogen dominance when you're in menopause? Because when menopause, your estrogens and progesterone all both drop. So how can you possibly be estrogen dominant? And you can be. In fact, if you think about it, estrogen receptor positive breast cancer, uterine cancer, ovarian cancer can all happen when women to 55 to 75 is the highest demographic developing breast cancer. And yet it is, and that is because of the dirty estrogens that we are producing. So yes, you can be low on estrogen and you can still experience symptoms of estrogen dominance. So in today's video, I'm gonna be showing you a couple of recipes. The first one we're gonna start off with is gonna be Menopause Latte, and then the other one we're gonna do is a hot flash tea. So the recipe that I'm gonna be showing is from the book, is on page 339. So that's what we're gonna be making together, okay? And then we're gonna move on to the hot flashes tea. So I'll show you step by step exactly what is happening, what to do, and the good stuff. So a couple of things before I dive into the recipe is we are doing a giveaway for the book on today's call, if you're listening live. And we're gonna give the book away as a form of a quiz. So I'm gonna ask you a question based on something I'm presenting today. There's maybe about something about the herbs, or something about menopause, or something about your hormones, and then what we're gonna do is my team is gonna select a winner based on the correct answers. Okay. The other thing is, if you have missed the other videos that I have been doing for the past several days, and we've covered everything from fibrocystic and painful breasts. We talked about painful PMSs and heavy periods. We've talked about, just the general estrogen dominance of what's going on, what are the foods that you can incorporate, all the good stuff. All of that is always going to be posted on overcomingestrogendominance.com/events. And Brittany, who is helping me out here today, is going to post the link in the comments. So take a look at that if you want to do a replay of all the past videos. So, why don't we dive in? Are we good, Cheryl? Is everything okay? All right, good. We're using a new technology, you guys, with some fancy new cameras set up around, and so we're kind of still learning as we go, but hopefully it's all gonna be good, and we're gonna have fun together, right? So let's start off with the menopausal latte, and the ingredients that we're gonna be using is we're gonna start off with cinnamon, so it's gonna be one of the big ones. We're gonna be using Dong Quai, which is also known as Angelica sinensis. And then, whatever plant-based milk, I certainly do not recommend for you to be drinking cow's milk. And so we are, the kind of milks that you can use for this recipe could be anything from oat milk to almond milk. Macadamia milk is wonderful. In this case here, I actually, just before this show, I made this milk from tiger nuts. For those of you who've been to the south of Spain and you have, or some of you maybe in Mexico, you have seen horchata. Horchata is often made with rice milk, but is also original horchata came from tiger nuts. And the cool thing is that they are not a nut. So if you're allergic to nuts, you can actually make this, you can drink this milk. And it's hypoallergenic, it's full of fiber. It tastes really, really good. It's got natural sweetness to it, which is lovely. And the way I make this is I basically put a whole bunch of tiger nuts, put water on top of that, put it through a Vitamix, and then run it for like good 5 minutes, strain it through a cheesecloth, and this is the outcome. It's basically beautiful fresh milk like that with no preservatives in it. So, okay, so why don't we just dive in? What you're gonna be doing is the first thing we wanna do is we're gonna warm up the milk. Let me just put these away so you can see my hands otherwise. You're gonna pick a little pot and then do 1.5 cups. If you know me for a while, you know that I'm not much into measuring, so I'm just gonna eyeball it. So about 1.5 cups, so that's gonna be your serving. and we're gonna warm it up. So I'm gonna watch this one like a hawk because we don't want it to be overflowing. Okay, so the next, while the milk is warming up, we're gonna make the herbal concoction here. So one thing I wanna just share with you, those are the 3 things we're gonna be using. What I wanna share with you is something really interesting. A few months ago, I posted on our group, our private group on Facebook, asking women, for those of you who followed our Estrogen Reset, I have an online program too called Estrogen Reset, but I turned that into a book, it's got a lot more information. But a lot of women have gone through the online program back then. This was, several months ago. And I've asked the women in our community, what have you done in your life that you have learned from us in order to address your hot flashes, right? And the interesting thing is what they said. There was a lot of really interesting comments. Some of them were about reducing gluten, taking out coffee, just generally reducing inflammation in the body. So reducing coffee, taking out gluten definitely can help, reducing sugar, right? And so, but the one overwhelming, most common response that we got is women saying that by stabilizing the blood sugar levels made a most profound difference for them. And I thought that was really interesting because that really led me to starting researching more. And what I have found is that, menopause is a broad spectrum condition, right? It can manifest in a lot of different symptoms. You've got brain health, you've got bone health, you've got mood issue, and you've got things like physiological stuff like hot flashes, right? So blood sugar balance can really, really help with hot flashes. So what you will see me do with both the recipes today, I'm using 2 herbs in this recipe, and there's gonna be another herb that I'm gonna show you in a second for the other recipe that, actually one of their main properties is to balance your blood sugar levels. So the first one is cinnamon, right? And cinnamon is just an amazing herb that in India, actually, fenugreek and cinnamon, there are actually studies that were done, clinical studies that were done in India to reduce blood sugar levels. Indians like sugar. I think it's the Brits that made this, it's like the Brits brought the sugar to India, and then that's how chai was created. And guess what? An average chai can contain as much as 5 to 7 teaspoons of sugar. It's really, really sweet. So diabetes is a problem in India. And so they started doing a lot of clinical trials, and they have discovered, well, I think, first of all, you should reduce the sugar, but they decided to rather add something in to see what can lower blood sugar levels in those subjects. And they have discovered the fenugreek and cinnamon were the 2 spices that are used on a daily basis in Indian cooking that can significantly help lower blood sugar levels. So, not surprisingly, in my recipes here, that's what we're gonna be using too. That's gonna help you stabilize your blood sugar levels. I would also add on to this that you do want to be, mindful and also control the amount of blood sugar the amount of sugar that you're consuming. One of the videos that I was showing you during the week is how to balance your blood sugar levels with starting with the right kind of breakfast, PFF kind of breakfast, protein, fat, and fiber. That way your blood sugar levels is nice and stabilized. It doesn't go like that, right? All right, so let's get to work. Can you see how I'm storing my cinnamon in a form of sticks like that, right? So the reason why I do sticks is because that way you can preserve the cinnamon a lot longer. And one of the things that you don't want to be buying, please don't buy cinnamon or generally herbs. They're already powdered and they're in a powder form, because their surface area is super largely exposed. They get oxidized really quickly, and when you smell the spice, and it doesn't have much smell. In fact, sometimes I go to my friends' houses and I open up a box of some spice and you smell it and you're like, what is this? It doesn't even have a smell. And it's not about the smell to be a snob, but the smells actually are, just wonderful volatile oils, and those oils actually have the medicinal value in an herb. So it's really important to remember that. Okay, so in this recipe here, we're talking about half a teaspoon of ground fresh cinnamon. So 1 stick is gonna be too much. And by the way, if you love cinnamon, you can put in more. However, you might wanna be careful with how much cinnamon you are putting in And I want to give you an example here of how something really wonderful and healthy can actually become quite toxic. So there is a compound in cinnamon called coumarin. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that if you do too much of coumarin, is still okay. Thank you. If you do too much of coumarin, then what happens is it really can impact your liver. So let me give you an example. I dated a wonderful man for a long period of time, and he got into this whole thing about chai, right? So everything was chai, and he loved cinnamon. So he went and bought like literally that much of cinnamon, and he will go through something like this within a week, right? And making his teas and all that. One day, after having, and we're talking about like he would drink a quart of chai at a time, and probably 2 or 3 of them a day. I know, crazy, but he did it. And what happened was, there was one morning he downed his chai, and then suddenly he went completely white. His eyes were shot red, and clearly he started perspiring. He was getting really, really sick. He lay down, and after about an hour, all of the symptoms went away. What we figured out was that he basically had a mild liver toxicity. He basically poisoned himself, and the culprit was the cinnamon. So this just goes to say cinnamon is amazing as an herb to help you stabilize your blood sugar levels. It's just a wonderful, tasty herb, but there is such a thing as too much of a good thing. So always be mindful about that. There's certain things that having too much of it is probably not gonna hurt you, but cinnamon is one of those. Now, the other thing I wanna just mention is there's various forms of cinnamon, and the type of cinnamon I highly recommend is Cinnamonum verum, which is verum as in Latin verum means the real cinnamon, also known as Ceylon cinnamon. That will contain a lot less coumarin in it as compared to the Vietnamese cinnamon or the cassia cinnamon, which are very high in coumarin. And quite honestly, if you switch over to this kind of cinnamon that I'm talking about, Cinnamonum verum, it's a very different taste. It's not a very different, but I find like once you go that way, it's a sweeter kind of cinnamon. It's more flavorful in many ways. I actually prefer it a lot more. So as you can see, I buy mine in sticks, and what we're gonna then do is grind it up. So I'm probably gonna go with like 1/3 of a stick in this case, and we're gonna be grinding them up. Can you see like how I'm doing everything is all freshly ground? Every time you see my recipes, I always do everything as a freshly ground recipe that's shown to you, because I want to make sure that we, if you pre-grind something, use it within a month or so. So do small batches. Like you don't need to pre-grind a whole bunch of powder, right? And then let it sit for months and months and months. All right, the other thing we're gonna be using is Dong Quai, and we're gonna use a teaspoon. So, and again, can you see how I'm using that in the form of, actually, let me just do it from my hand. You see, I'm using, can we see? Yeah. I'm using that in the form of these chunks, right? Rather than be using something that's already powdered and kind of highly oxidized. So I'm using a teaspoon of that, and we're gonna grind up this baby. I'm using a coffee grinder, but I would not, if I was drinking coffee, I wouldn't be grinding coffee and spices in the same grinder. The oils in coffee are so strong that they will take over the entire taste of everything. So invest in a little grinder like that. I use Krups, Krups, and Krups is really, I've had this, look at this, this guy is so beat up, right? Look, this has gone through like so many different herbs and spices, and including turmeric, and everything is so stained, and honestly, I don't quite care. But this thing, I've had it for like 3 years now, and it's still going strong. So when it's not making that kind of super loud noise, that means it's a pretty well nicely ground up. Yeah, I would do it tiny bit more. And when you do it at home, you can do this, a little bit longer, because you're not gonna be just infusing the herbs into, ooh, look at all that powder. You see, this is almost like a magic show going on here. All right, so I had the milk just now on a stove and it's really nice and warm. So hey you guys, we're working on getting some cameras right above here, so in the future you're gonna be able to see things from up above, like a goddess or a god. Okay, so I'm just gonna throw that in, and a lot of people ask me, why don't you just infuse it and and then strain it? I think it's because I actually really like the thickness of it, and I think it's a really nice way of getting the herbs. It's like, when you do a supplement, can I get a glass? Please, thank you. Forgot about a glass. One of the cool things I think about when it's like, when you do a supplement, right? The supplement has all the powder in a capsule, and so a transparent, perfect, yes. Thanks so much, Cheryl. And this is going to be your serving. I love this little pot, how it's got this really smart little mouth so that nothing drips, okay? And that is your menopausal latte, really simple thing like this. Now, when we say menopausal latte, it can help with everything, with mood swings. Don't Quai, something that I didn't really talk much about just now. Don't Quai is Angelica sinensis, is just an incredible, wonderful herb that has historically been used in traditional Chinese medicine for a whole variety of purposes. Menopause, as in helping women, is slightly estrogenic, so it brings up the estrogen, but don't worry about that, because remember, higher estrogen doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It just means that it actually helps you with symptoms of low estrogen, but it's how you break down those estrogens matters. It's not the amount of estrogen that you have, okay? So Angelica sinensis has historically been used in traditional Chinese medicine for helping women with hot flashes, a lot of mood swings, memory loss. So it's quite an amazing herb. I need to top up because I'm running low. Okay, so that was the first recipe I wanted to show you. And let's see if we have any questions before we dive into. Oh, we have a lot of questions coming up here. Let's see. How long will the tiger milk stay fresh? And the answer is that I've kept tiger nut milk in the fridge for as long as, I would say, 10 days. One of the things that will happen, which is completely normal, is that it will start separating. Any natural milk that you do is because you don't use any additives. Additives would, like binders, right? It will separate. And tiger milk develops like a thick, almost like a goo-like or glue-like substance at the bottom. So what you need to do is when you take it out of fridge, just do this, for a minute, and then it will just blend back in. So nothing to worry about, nothing to be worried. It's nothing. Rose Lily saying, in your practice, have you seen large 10 centimeter fibroids shrink with the help of herbs by reducing estrogen? TCM practitioners say anything 6 centimeters or smaller can easily be reduced, but they recommend surgery for anything bigger. Would love to hear your point of view. So that's a great question. So we talked about fibroids yesterday, and there are some astringent herbs that I recommend, and also enzymes that we talked about. Enzymes specifically that are targeting fibroid tissue. I have seen definitely women with very large fibroids in the size of oranges shrink. So I don't really see a reason why not try it first and get another sonogram, a month later and see whether there is success with that. Deborah is saying, my hot flashes always hit me in the early morning hours and wake me up. Would like some suggestions to prevent that. So Deborah, so it basically means that your body is having fluctuations in your blood sugar levels and what in the early morning hours. So the question is, what do you do at night that destabilizes your blood sugar levels, right? And a lot of times women have that when they have alcohol, for example, at night, or a dessert, and that will wake them up in the early morning hours in the middle of the night. So that's something to consider. What do you do at night? I want to give you, that's one of the stories that I share in a book, Overcoming Estrogen Dominance. I shared a story of one of my clients that was when I was back in private practice, and she was an ER doctor, and she came to me because she had these horrendous hot flashes. And the problem was that she was a daytime ER doc, And so she'll have her breakfast, let's say 7 o'clock in the morning. Then she'll go to ER at 11 a.m. like regularly, right? She'll get this massive hot flash and a sweat. And, you know, when you're in an emergency room doctor, like that's the last thing you want to deal with. It's like your own problem when you're dealing with some serious emergencies. So she came to me and she says, listen, I really need to change this. And one of the observations that she had made from the journal I asked her to keep, and by the way, the journal is in here as well. It's called the FMP journal, Food, Mood, Poop Journal. That really allows you to tune into your body. And she kept the journal reluctantly. She kept the journal and she came back and she said, you know, I see that when I have breakfast at 7, my hot flash always comes back at 11, which would basically mean that it's exactly like 4 hours later, right, that she has the hot flash. So she said, you know, as an experiment, I did a bunch of almonds just 15 minutes before 11 o'clock. So 10:45, she'll have a bunch of almonds. And guess what? Almonds is all about fiber. It's got a little bit of protein. It's got a lot of fat, right? And she would have a handful of those and then the hot flash wouldn't happen. So the question is that I'm like, okay, well, great. I'm so glad that you figured that part out. But the question is, what do you eat for breakfast that you get a drop like this? And her breakfast was yogurt with fruits, right? And she'll have maple syrup on top of that, or she'll have cereal, you know, just traditional American breakfast. And obviously that wasn't working for her. So we changed her breakfast and she never had to be like, oh my God, it's 10:45. I need to have those almonds, right? So it can really make a very big difference, blood sugar level. So if Deborah is having those hot flashes at night, the question is, what do you do at night before going to bed? Or what can you do differently to stabilize your blood sugar levels? Linda saying, can I ask if blackstrap molasses is a good source of minerals to help balance blood sugar? I put cinnamon in a decaffeinated coffee, love it. Yeah, they really are. And there's definitely one of the healthier sweeteners that is out there. One thing I actually forgot, because I was talking so much about herbs, is the recipe actually calls for a teaspoon of raw honey. So I've got some raw honey right here. And in my case here, I'm just using honey that I last year actually infused with thyme and rosemary. What else is there? Sage and ginger. So there's an infused honey. The reason why I didn't put it in here is because tiger nut milk is naturally already very sweet. So I don't need any more sweetness. But if you're using an unsweetened almond milk, for example, unsweetened macadamia milk, then adding just a teaspoon of sugar can really make the whole experience quite wonderful. How much cinnamon is too much? You know, Rebecca, if you just follow our recipes, I think that's just the amount that's recommended. It really depends on how much coumarin is in a cinnamon, right? So, you know, I would just say be moderate. If you're just sprinkling it around, here we're using half a teaspoon. Those are moderate amounts. That's all okay. If you start drinking, let's say, or eating cinnamon by the tablespoons a day, I mean, that is obviously a problem. So I think just exercise some common sense. Monica saying, is it better to freshly ground, I suppose. And the answer is that, like I mentioned, you know, you can pre-grind your herbs and keep it as long as you use it within, I would say, a week to a month. After that, they really lose their potency. And it's not just the smell, but it's also just their medicinal value drops as well. How do you make tiger nut? Do you have a how-to link? So we do actually. I have made tiger nut milks and various other plant milks. And you can get that from Brittany. If you could pull out a link, an old link from some of the old Facebook lives that I have done, or I think we should also have that on the website, how to make plant milk. I'm pretty sure we have that link. The cool thing is that it's the same method for whether you're using cashews, whether you're using sunflower seeds. You know, you can make it from macadamia. Macadamia is actually one of my favorite milks too. Tiger nuts are really great, right? And so the method is always the same: 1 cup to 4 cups of water. So 1 cup of nuts or seeds or tiger nuts, which is a tuber, and then 4 cups of water in a high-speed blender. Alex is saying, I have social anxiety, and when I'm in public places, I get hot flashes and get sweaty. It's awful. Is that a link to unbalanced blood sugar levels? So possibly, but one thing, Alex, you might want to look into is something called pylorrhea, and it is a condition that is a social anxiety, actually. If you go to my website, hormonesbalance.com, and just look for Trudy Scott, she is a practitioner who has written a wonderful article for us, and it's actually a B6 and zinc deficiency. And Trudy has for 30 years dealt with social anxiety, always thinking that she's like this introverted geek, and and never liking to, like, she'll be like the last person wanting to go to a social event or to big gatherings of people, especially when she didn't know people. And ever since she fixed her B6 and zinc deficiency, her life has completely changed. So it was a pretty incredible story. So that could be that. Where can you purchase tiger nuts? So the brand that I like to use is organic tiger nuts from Gemini, and you can get that online. A lot of Whole Foods places now sell them. But don't buy the flour, the pre-ground ones. They started mixing that with a lot of other stuff and all that. You can easily get that on Thrive Market. You can get it online on Amazon. You can get it on VitaCost, all of these places. Can you have this if you have a milk intolerance? Robin is asking. Absolutely. So, like I said, tiger nut milk, one of the cool things about tiger nut milk is the fact that it is a tuber. It's not a nut, it's not a seed. So a lot of you who are like doing AIP, or if you're allergic to nuts, then you are gonna be safe with tiger nuts. I have not really come across anybody who's ever written to us saying, I drank tiger nut milk and I got really sick. So I think that's part of the reason why I use it in my previous cookbook as well. And this cookbook, we use it as a suggestion because it is hypoallergenic. Okay, you guys, so why don't we just move on to, actually, I'm going to pop my question now for the book giveaway. So the question is going to be, name 2 herbs, and it has to be the correct ones. Name 2 herbs that help to lower blood sugar balance. Okay, all right, that's the question. All right, so let me clear my table and bring on something I want to show you, and that is our next recipe, and as we're gonna be making a hot flash tea. So how many here have hot flashes, and have you identified when do they come on? By the way, thinking now about Alex's question also, it makes me think about one thing, is that stress can actually also throw your blood sugar balance out of control. So that's another consideration for sure. Okay, so this, and we also still need cinnamon for this. So we can see cinnamon is present in both the recipes. So we're gonna be working with cinnamon. We're gonna be working with red raspberry leaf. And then we've got fenugreek. Okay, fenugreek is not a very well-known herb in Western culture. It is quite a pungent herb, but very widely used in India. And a lot of curries are using fenugreek. And some of you who've been to India, or you like to go to an Indian store or Indian restaurant, if you walk in with got all that great smell of spices, I can tell you one thing. When I smell fenugreek, it's like I feel like I'm being transported to an Indian restaurant. Okay, so the method that we're gonna be using for this particular tea is called a decoction. So there is a difference between infusion and decoction, and it's really simple. Infusion is when you do your little tea bag in a hot tea, right? And you just like 10, 15 minutes, right? And your tea is done. That's an infusion. That's a quick one. And you do that typically with leaves, leafy plants, leafy herbs. When it comes to working with herbs that are harder, so things like seeds, such as, for example, fenugreek is a seed. If you have bark, such as cinnamon is a bark. If you have roots you're working with, like donquai I was showing earlier, right? Those are all hardy kind of plant material. And for that, if you just dip it in hot water for 10, 15 minutes, you ain't gonna have enough time to extract all the different compounds, the medicinal compounds from the plant into the water. So that's when decoctions come in. And decoctions are a slow 30 to 40 minute low on low heat. You bring the water to the boil and then reduce it, and you basically then slowly boil it and when I say boil it, it's not like boiling, right? It's low heat. You're infusing it over a course of 30 to 40 minutes. So in the book, and we actually have an explanation of those two, like if you are maybe driving, you're not paying attention, there is a whole explanation on the difference between decoctions and infusions. And so all of that is explained right there in the book right here, okay? So what we're gonna do is, let me flip over to page, I'm doing page 347. So we're gonna be making our hot flash tea. By the way, the other teas that you guys are getting from the book, for those of you who got it, I also have a few other, I think, interesting teas for you. Women's Daily Tea, something you can drink on a daily basis. That's just overall support for, really delicious overall support for your endocrine system. We have a brain boost tea that's like boink, especially for those of you in menopause when you go like, you've got a lot of brain fog and and you're just not as sharp as you were once. We're using herbs here that can really, really stimulate the brain. You don't want to drink it at night. And then we have a liver detoxification tea, and we have a digestive tea. We have a sleepy time tea, and then we have a hot flash tea. So this is what I'm going to be showing you today is the hot flash tea, since today is a hot flash day. And for those of you who are able to join us live on our later call, I am really happy to say that my good friend, Dr. Anna Kebaka, is going to be joining us, and she's an OBGYN who specializes in menopause, and hot flashes is one of her jams. Okay, so let's get into making the hot flash tea. The recipe here is calling from 1 quart of water, so this is right in here, okay? And then what we're going to be doing is we are using 2 tablespoons of fenugreek seed. So as you can see, I love to use my pestle mortar. I think it's just such a really wonderful way of getting things pounded, open them up. Not everything you have to put through. Like for example, if you have a ginger root or you have turmeric, right? And you want to open up that root, the more, again, remember, the more surface area you're exposed, right? The more of the volatile oils are going to be available to you. So it's really important to do that. We're going to be using, 2 tablespoons of fenugreek. And the reason why I'm going to pound this just a tiny bit. That's in a second. And then I'm also going to do 2 tablespoons of cinnamon chips. So I don't have chips, I have bark. So we can just eyeball it. 2 tablespoons is probably going to be like, this is good enough. This should make it maybe a tiny bit more. Okay, that's our cinnamon. Smells so good. Just as you break your spices, like it just makes you feel healthy already, just inhaling that wonderful smell, the freshness of those herbs. What we're gonna do is just pound it slightly to open up the seeds. You don't need to we don't want to powder it, because we're gonna be putting that in water, and if you put it in water as a powder form, then it's gonna be pretty, you can't strain it and such. So just a little bit of pounding of the seeds of fenugreek, okay, and it's pretty much ready, and I'll show you in a second what it looks like. So earlier on, just before we started filming, I already started my decoction, and it's right in here. It's been on the stove for the past, I infused it for 40 minutes. And so then what you're gonna do is you basically, so what's in here is a quart of water, okay? And then you put in whatever you've pounded in here, also adding in red raspberry leaf. So that we are using in this here either 2 tablespoons of Tulsi. I ran out of Tulsi, so I'm using red raspberry leaf, which is just a wonderful herb as well. And all around is also slightly estrogenic as well, so also can help with symptoms of menopause. So all these 3 herbs, fresh red raspberry, cinnamon, and fenugreek, is what is in here right now. This was done 2 hours ago, so I'm just gonna strain it. Okay, we don't really need to press it down because these herbs are not, there's not enough leafy material in here. There's not much is gonna come out if you, okay. And we're just gonna put that in the sink. Thank you, Sharon. And there you have it. So a quart it's something that you don't need to drink a quart a day. I would recommend to do probably 2 cups a day. So half of this is pretty much enough, right? So this is really what, this is what the concoction is. Fenugreek, cinnamon, red raspberry leaf, a quart of water. You simmer it for 40 minutes on the stovetop, right? And that's your, that's your tea. So one of the things to consider, and this is one of my earlier questions that I asked, the answers to that question, which is correct, is that fenugreek and cinnamon are the 2 herbs that help you reduce your blood sugar levels. And if you heard me talk about it earlier, hot flashes is most of the time in women is a combination of low estrogen levels combined with blood sugar dysregulations. You being hypoglycemic, having very sugary breakfast, drinking alcohol at night. So one thing a lot of women also notice with hot flashes is if you have a couple of glasses of wine, for some women it could be just even a glass of wine, you have to remember that alcohol is sugar. Ethanol converts to sugar. So having a glass of wine and then waking up 4 hours later with a hot flash and having a night sweat is a hot flash that was most likely brought on by alcohol. So I feel like these kind of teas, such as this one, works wonders when we combine it with a proper diet. There is a whole section in my new book, Overcoming Estrogen Dominance, on just how to regulate your blood sugar levels. And it doesn't mean you have to give up sugar like 100%. It just means to be a little bit more conscious of where sugar is coming from. One of my earlier videos, one of the things I talked about, that one of the biggest shockers for me coming to the United States was the realization how much sugar there was in everything. Even the Polish kielbasa has sugar in it in the United States, which, as a somebody who was born to Polish parents, I find it quite offensive, actually. There is sugar in ketchup, there's sugar in soups and dressings, and everything is really sweet in the United States. And so you might want to pay a lot more attention on how much sugar you're consuming. Start looking at the back of the label rather than looking at the front, and understand that 4 grams of sugar is 1 teaspoon. 4 grams is 1 teaspoon. So if you pick up, for example, a juice, like I want to just give you because this is like one of the biggest shockers, was a green juice from Odwalla, just as an example. I'm not calling them out, but just sharing, right? It's a fact. You look at the back of the label, and this little tiny bottle has something like, it's like maybe 20-ounce bottle, 14-ounce bottle, and it's got like 32 grams of sugar. It's crazy. Take 32 divided by 4. What do you get? Like 8 teaspoons of sugar right there at hello, right? So be aware of where sugar is coming from. Look at how much sugar is in a frappuccino that you order every morning. It's on Starbucks website, 68 grams of sugar. That's like 17 teaspoons of sugar is in a frappuccino coffee. But we don't think about it, right? So no wonder it can really throw our blood sugar levels out of control, and that can significantly contribute to hot flashes. So if you combine this kind of tea when it helps you regulate your blood sugar levels, especially if you have genetic predisposition towards diabetes. And by the way, diabetes is not hereditary. It is something that you might have a predisposition to be having diabetes, but it's still food triggers it. It turns it on, if you will. So I think combining things like this lovely tea with changes in diet, right, and balancing your blood sugar levels will just give you really wonderful results. All right, I'm gonna take a couple of more questions if we have any, and then we can move on to Brittany. Let me know if you have any other questions that came on. And Robin is asking, can you reuse the herbs again? No, I wouldn't do that. It's the whole idea is that you imparted a lot of the constituents that are going to be working for you into the water here, into this infusion, into this decoction. And so if you're making it again, it might work, but it's going to be significantly, it wouldn't have the medicinal power. And this is really what we're after. Alex is saying, do you put the herbs in a pot when the water is cold and then bring it to a boil, or after it started boiling? So you can, you put the herbs in the cold water, and then you bring it to a boil and then reduce it down to a simmer. Okay, and it's all in the book as well. Okay, so yeah, I think there might be some other questions coming in. While I'm just gonna stay on for a couple more minutes. I would love to ask you guys, what have you learned from all the stuff that we've been putting out for the past few days, and what are you committing to doing? Like, what have you learned and what are you going to be implementing in your own life? You know, I have to say, this is like probably one of the biggest satisfactions that I personally get, is to teach you stuff is one thing, but I think there's nothing better than getting an email from you guys and says that, you know, I've tried this and this, and it's completely changed my life. So I really hope that you guys consider that. So does too much ginger give you hot flashes? That's a really interesting question, and the answer is it can, because ginger is very heating, and so it can. Arushi is saying supplements for menopause. I'm going to be talking about supplements in the coming days, so stay tuned for that. How many days can you keep the tea for? I would keep it in the fridge for no more than 5 days. Okay. All right. I'm going to be coming on a little bit later today. We're going to be talking about hot flashes more with my good friend, Dr. Anna Kebeka. And thank you so much for being here today with me and making this wonderful decoction. And I'll see you later today.